After a lifetime of taking care of my father, he told me he was leaving his estate to my brother, calling me incompetent and a burden. He kicked me out of the house and laughed as he locked the door. As I stood outside, heartbroken, I swore I'd make him regret this. What he didn't know was that I had already found a way to take everything he loved and leave him empty. I gave my life to that man. My dad was never a warm person. He wasn't abusive, not in the way people usually mean it, but he had a way of making you feel like a burden just by looking at you too long. After my mom died, sudden brain aneurysm when I was 20, I was the one who stayed. My younger brother Eric went to UCLA the same year she passed. I stayed in Portland, picked up 2 part-time jobs, and made sure Dad didn't fall apart. He never once asked me how I was doing. Not after the funeral. Not after I broke up with my girlfriend because I couldn't balance her needs and my father's declining moods. My life became about checking in, picking up groceries, unclogging toilets, calling the insurance company because he couldn't understand those people. I was the default son, the fill-in wife, the unpaid nurse, handyman, therapist. Eric sent birthday cards once a year and called on Christmas. But he was the golden boy. Eric's got a real job, Dad would say. You wouldn't understand his world. Like working in a warehouse and picking up part-time print jobs wasn't a real life. Like the day-to-day grind of keeping someone else alive didn't count as work. I lived in that house for over 2 decades. I paid rent, utilities when Dad was short, bought all the groceries once he forgot how debit cards worked. I handled his meds, drove him to the VA hospital, cleaned up after him when he had a stomach bug and didn't make it to the toilet. I gave up promotions at work because he needed someone home more often. I gave up dating, gave up my 20s, then my 30s. I turned 45 and realized I didn't even know who I was anymore outside of being his caretaker. Then he had a stroke. December of last year. I found him slumped in his recliner, drool coming out the side of his mouth, his eyes looking in 2 directions. I called 911. Spent the night pacing at the hospital. For 3 months, I managed everything. His recovery schedule, the physical therapy appointments, his meals, his hygiene. He couldn't even feed himself the first few weeks. I helped him relearn how to walk. Eric flew up once. Stayed for 4 hours. He sat there like he was visiting a museum exhibit. Took a selfie with Dad and posted it on Instagram with some bullshit caption about family first. Then he was gone. And after all that, after everything, I came home from work one Monday in March, and Dad was sitting in the kitchen like he had something important to say. I'll never forget the look on his face. Like he'd been rehearsing it in the mirror. "I think it's time you moved out," he said. I stared at him. What? I've thought a lot about this. I want to leave the house to Eric. He's more stable. More capable. You've always been kind of dependent. It's not healthy. I felt something snap in me. Are you serious? I've been the one taking care of you. I didn't ask you to. That was your choice. My throat tightened. You think Eric deserves this house? He's going to take care of it. You just live here. You don't own anything. He stood up and walked to the front door, opened it like I was a damn guest. You can grab your things, but I want you out by tonight. He closed the door on me as I stood outside with 2 bags of clothes and a backpack. I remember he laughed just once. Before the lock clicked. Not a big, dramatic laugh. Just a small, satisfied chuckle. Like this was a long overdue correction. And that's when I swore to myself. I was going to make him regret it. All of it. What he didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that I had already started preparing for something like this. I didn't trust him fully. Not after years of dismissiveness and subtle insults. So when I took over during his stroke recovery, I made copies of everything. His insurance forms, legal paperwork, bank statements. I recorded our conversations. I even scanned his will when he left it open one day on his desk. I knew he was working with a guy named Rick Talbot at a local law office in Beaverton. I made a note of every detail. And even better, he had given me partial power of attorney during his recovery. Not the full legal one, but enough to act on his behalf financially and medically while he was incapacitated. He probably thought I'd destroy the papers after he got better. But I didn't. Because I was done being the son who waited in the shadows while the golden boy got rewarded for doing nothing. I had spent my life cleaning up their messes. Now it was time to make one of my own. And I knew exactly where to start. I didn't make a scene right away. That's not how you win against people like my father and Eric. You wait. You learn. You collect. First thing I did was call Rick Talbot's office. Dad's lawyer. I pretended to be Dad's assistant, said I was just confirming the status of his updated will. The receptionist was clueless and too chatty. She confirmed that the house and remaining assets were being left to Eric. Asked for the date it was finalized. She said late February. Right after Dad started walking again. Right after Eric's last visit. It all clicked then. Eric hadn't just flown up to see how things were going. He came up to convince Dad to cut me out. Maybe he promised to take over the house, rent it out, flip it, whatever. Eric always had a pitch. He probably told Dad I was too slow, too soft, too useless. I could hear him saying it. Dad, he doesn't have a future. Let me handle it. I started digging into their lives. I knew where Eric worked, some tech-adjacent consulting firm in San Diego. I checked public records and found something interesting. Eric wasn't doing as well as he pretended. He had credit card debt. 2 liens on a rental property he tried to flip in Palm Springs. And, even more interesting, he had convinced Dad to co-sign a private loan 2 years ago. $75,000. Dad never told me about that. I requested copies of Dad's bank statements from the months I had access. Buried in the transactions were monthly payments to Meridian Lending Solutions, Eric's loan. Dad had been quietly paying $1,500 a month for 2 years. That's why groceries got tighter. That's why utility bills sat unpaid. He was propping up the son, who never lifted a finger. Meanwhile, I was buying him groceries from my own paycheck. That's when I decided. I wasn't just going to ruin the will. I was going to make sure they lost everything they tried to steal from me. I called in a favor from an old friend who worked in elder care legal services. We met for coffee. I told her everything. I didn't lie, not once. I told her I had power of attorney while he was recovering. I had paid for half his care with my own money. I showed her records, dates, receipts. She gave me a list of steps to take. That night, I went back to the house while Dad was out at physical therapy. I still had my old key. He'd never bothered to change the locks. I let myself in and scanned every document I could find. Bank info, property deed, medical records, his signed POA, dated the month of his stroke. I emailed copies to myself, printed extras, and took a flash drive with backups. Then I opened the junk drawer by the kitchen phone. Same place it had always been. I found the envelope labeled passwords. He still used a handwritten list. I was in his email within minutes. And that's where I found the worst part. An email from Eric to Dad. Don't worry, I'll take care of the house. Once he's out, you'll be free of that dead weight for good. Dead weight. They didn't just push me out. They thought I was trash. From that moment, it wasn't just about revenge. It was about showing them exactly who they underestimated. The next few weeks were a blur. I filed a formal complaint with the Oregon Department of Justice, reporting financial elder abuse, naming Eric as the manipulator who encouraged our father to alter legal documents while recovering from a medical emergency. My friend coached me through the paperwork. I submitted my bank records, his POA documents, his emails. I filed to dispute the will, officially contesting it based on undue influence and elder coercion. Then I filed a separate small claims case for unpaid caregiving costs, detailing every hour I spent over the last 2 years. I had time logs, receipts, calendars. My lawyer told me it wouldn't be a quick fight, but it was real. And it was winnable. But that wasn't enough. I sent anonymous packets to Eric's employer with documentation of his financial misconduct, using his father's money to pay off personal debt. Not illegal on its own, but it sure looked bad, especially when tied to elder financial dependency. A week later, I checked LinkedIn, his job was gone. No announcement. Just erased. Dad called me the next day. First time since he kicked me out. You think this is going to scare me? He barked. No, I said. I think this is going to ruin you. He cursed and hung up. I smiled for the first time in months. But I wasn't finished yet. About 3 weeks after that phone call, I got served at work. It was a formal cease and desist from Dad's lawyer, Rick Talbot. They accused me of harassment, unauthorized access to private documents, and defamation. Rick's tone was smug, like he thought I'd back off just because they got the law involved. What he didn't realize was I wasn't scared of courts. I'd already lived through worse. And I had receipts to back every claim. But it still shook me. I'd been so sure of my footing. My friend at Legal Services told me to stay calm. This is a scare tactic, she said. They want to rattle you. It worked, at least for a moment. I filed my formal response through the court. Denied everything. Attached proof of POA. Attached screenshots of emails, timelines of his recovery, evidence that I lived in the house and contributed financially for over 20 years. It took me hours to organize, but I did it. I turned it all in, dressed in the same suit I wore to my mom's funeral. The only one I had. A week later, I got a call I didn't expect. From Eric. You need to stop, he said. I didn't say anything. He continued, quieter this time. Dad's not doing great. His blood pressure's through the roof. He's confused. He thinks the house is going to get taken. I stayed silent. Look, Eric said, trying to sound calm. We can work something out. You want part of the estate? Fine. But this scorched earth thing, you're killing him. I almost laughed. That's funny. He said I was dead weight. I guess now we know who really drags him down. He hung up. 2 days later, I found out why he called. Dad had collapsed again, another stroke, worse this time. He was back in the hospital, this time in the ICU. And Eric was panicking. With Dad incapacitated again, the estate couldn't move forward. Any changes to the will would come under even more scrutiny now. And with my legal claims pending, everything was frozen. But here's the twist I never expected. A nurse called me. She said she recognized me from when I helped care for Dad the first time. He's asking for you, she said. He's not very coherent, but he keeps saying your name. I sat with that for a full hour. Couldn't eat. Couldn't think. Then I went. When I walked into that ICU room, I barely recognized him. Tubes everywhere. Skin pale. Eyes darting around the room like he was looking for the past. When he saw me, he tried to speak, but all that came out was a breathy rasp. I leaned in. What? He mouthed something again. This time I caught it. Sorry. For a second, I felt something crack in me. All those years, everything I did, I finally heard the word I never thought I'd get. But it was too late. He was too far gone. He'd spent a lifetime withholding love and dropped a weak apology when he had nothing left to lose. I left without saying anything. Back home, I found an email from the lawyer I'd been working with. She told me something new. The DOJ had officially opened a case into elder coercion and financial misconduct, and Rick Talbot was under investigation. Turns out, Rick had a pattern of revising wills under questionable circumstances. I wasn't the only one filing complaints. And then, another shock. Eric had filed for bankruptcy. He thought he could inherit the house, flip it, and pay off his debt. But with the will frozen and my legal filings pending, he couldn't access anything. The moment the court case got traction, his lenders pulled everything. One of his creditors even tried to sue our dad's estate. The whole thing blew up in his face. Eric started calling me daily, then texting. Apologies, half-truths, long rants, begging me to drop the filings. I didn't respond. I was no longer the burden. I was the one holding all the power. But I wasn't finished yet. Dad never came home from the ICU. He lasted 3 more weeks, slipping in and out of lucidity. Eric stayed at the hospital a few times, probably trying to play the grieving son, but I knew it was about the will. When Dad finally died, everything froze, just like I expected. His estate couldn't be distributed until all legal disputes were resolved. I was listed as next of kin on all the hospital paperwork. Not Eric. Me. Because despite everything he did, Dad never changed that part. Probably forgot. Maybe just assumed I'd always be the one handling the dirty work. He was right about that in the end. The funeral was small. I didn't speak. Eric tried to deliver some fake-sounding eulogy about family and strength and sacrifice. I sat in the back and kept my mouth shut. Let him sweat. Let him pretend. The next month was chaos for him. With the Department of Justice case moving forward, all financial transfers from Dad's accounts were placed under review. The executor of the will, Rick Talbot, was suspended due to the ongoing investigation into multiple misconduct allegations. Turns out mine wasn't the only family he'd helped manipulate into cutting people out of wills. Eric's bankruptcy went public. His name showed up in a local business blog tied to financial mismanagement and failed real estate ventures. His consulting job in San Diego didn't take him back. Too much heat. Too much bad press. When the Fed started looking into the loan Dad had co-signed, Eric had to appear in a deposition and explain how the money was used. That's when the final blow landed. Through my lawyer, I submitted a formal claim to the estate for caregiver reimbursement and property equity. Since I'd lived in the home for over 20 years, paid rent, utilities, and had documentation of care provided, we argued that I had an equitable interest in the property. Oregon law backed me. Not only did I win the right to contest the will, I forced the estate into a full audit. The house was frozen as an asset, meaning Eric couldn't touch it, couldn't sell it, couldn't rent it. And when the case closed 8 months later, the judge ruled in my favor. Half the estate was awarded to me. The other half, used to pay off remaining debts, legal fees, and settlements related to Eric's misconduct. He walked away with nothing. I moved back into the house a year to the day after he kicked me out. I didn't change much at first. Just cleaned, repainted, got rid of the old recliner where he used to sit and grumble about the world. That chair went straight into the landfill. I stood over the dumpster and watched it drop, one last reminder that he didn't know me anymore. Eric called me once after that. Just once. "You really ruined everything," he said, voice raw and bitter. "No," I said. "I revealed everything." He hasn't called since. I live quietly now. I rebuilt some of my life. Got a part-time job at a bookstore. Started dating again, nothing serious, just living. For the first time in decades, I make choices for myself. My name's on the deed. My hands paid for this house in more ways than one. Sometimes I sit on the porch at night and think about all the years I wasted trying to earn love from people who never planned to give it. But I don't regret what I did. They tried to throw me away. I made sure they lost everything they thought they owned. And I took back what was always mine.